Sounds a lot like America, yes? Getting bigger and bigger. The more you acquire, the more it takes to upkeep that which you've acquired. If you've got incredible nice landscaping at your home, it takes maintenance, it takes work in order for the landscaping to remain nice. And so this is what's going on in Rome. It's become an empire, and they're neglecting the needs. And Paul is reminding Timothy in this moment to command those who are rich, to not be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth. So if you're like me in this moment, command those who are rich. It's easy to check out, right? Paul's obviously speaking to those who are rich. Excuse me. He's obviously speaking to those who are rich. I'm not rich. We live in modest suburbia. It sounds like I just went through puberty. Excuse me. We live in modest suburbia. We live in middle-class America. We're not rich. Let me toss out a few stats for you, just real quick, just to put things into perspective for us, real fast. America controls 20% of the world's wealth. America controls 20% of the world's wealth. Now, there's approximately 6 billion people in the world. There's nearly 300 million Americans. So that means that the American population makes up less than 5% of the world population. Less than 5% of the world population owns and controls a fifth of the world's wealth. A fifth of the world's wealth. Americans are rich. You drive a car. 8% of the world has a car. 8%. The other 92% of the world does not have a car. If they see you in your car, it doesn't matter if it's a hoopty, it doesn't matter what you have. You can have Walmart spinners on it. It doesn't matter. They see your car and they say, rich. And meanwhile, a third of American families own 3 cars. 1 billion people. 1 billion people live on less than an American dollar a day, while another 2.5 billion people live on less than $2 American dollars a day. Do you have more than $1 or $2 in your wallet, in your pocket, in your car, and at your house? If you do, you're rich. You're rich. Americans spend $1.5 billion a year on pet food. $1.5 billion a year on pet food. That's 4 times the amount that is spent on baby food. And then we dress them up in little sweaters. Say we love them. Ridiculous. Americans, experts say that for $20 billion, health, basic nutrition, and clean drinking water can go to everybody in the world. For $20 billion, it's the same amount that Americans spend on ice cream every single year. America spends more on trash bags annually than half the world spends on all their goods combined. As an American, we're rich. As an American, we live in the most affluent, most quote-unquote blessed country in time and existence that the world has ever known. We are rich. Paul says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant. If pride wells up from what we have, it's a warning sign. Because of what we've done to accumulate the things that we have, it's a warning sign. To not be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. Paul has a lot to talk about wealth. If you go over to verse 9, it says, people who want to get rich fall into temptation. People who want to get rich fall into temptation, in a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. This word plunge literally means as if to be drowned. As if to be drowned, ruin and destruction. These are 2 Greek words that combine. They literally mean complete and utter destruction. If we're not careful, the desire for wealth the progress towards wealth, the progress towards accumulation and acquiring wealth will lead to complete and utter destruction. He goes on to say in verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Now, we have to understand in this moment that we must not fall captive to the standards that have been set by this world. Romans 12, 1 and 2. Do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. This, ultimately, says in verse 1, this is worship. So is it that we potentially have worship wrong because we're still in the process of the accumulation and the acquiring of wealth? We have fallen victim to the standards that have been set by this world. But tell them not to put their hope in wealth. It is so uncertain. Goes on to say again in verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. This word root, it connotes a hidden source of life. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It's this hidden source of life. So if you have a garden, so to speak, full of roots, and you want to rid the garden of the roots, the garden of the weeds, excuse me. We must get rid of the roots of the weeds. Yes, or else it's just going to grow back, yes? The love of money will force us and thrust us into a position that makes us live by the world's standards. We must not live by the world's standards. Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 through 3. You've now been rescued by Christ. Set your minds on things above. Set your hearts on things above. We are called to a different reality as followers of Christ. It goes on to say that some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. The reality is this, that the acquiring of wealth most oftentimes in history has led to more ruin than it has to good. The desire to acquire wealth, the desire to acquire money has led more times than not to ruin than it has to wealth, than it has to prosperity, than it has to good. And so Paul gives these sharp instructions to tell those who are rich, to command them to not put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. This is the last thing I'm saying. I'm going to tag Brian, and Brian's going to come up and close us up. But here's what we need to know at this point. He tells them not to put their hope in wealth, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Don't put your hope in wealth. It's so uncertain. But put your hope in God. And here's the picture that Paul's created for us. The things that we hope in, ultimately, we learn to trust in those things. Again, kind of a ridiculous example, but I'm hoping in this stool that when I sit in this stool, that this stool is going to hold me. And so since I'm hoping that this stool is going to hold me, the act of sitting in this stool is trust. It would have been funny if it would have collapsed. This is an act of trust. What you hope in, you ultimately place your trust in. But it goes a step further, because the things and the people that we trust in, we ultimately rely upon. Put your hope in God. Trust God. Learn dependence on God. Trust God. Learn dependence on God, because He richly provides everything for our enjoyments. Again, the picture here is that when God provides everything and anything to us, it's always meant to be a gift. It's always meant to be a gift. Everything you have is a gift. Your car, gift. Your food, gift. 800 million people went without a meal today. 300 of them were children. Did you eat today? Gift. Did you go to school today? Gift. Are you at home and are you lying your head down on a pillow in a warm, secure, safe home? Gift. The fact that we've gathered here today? Gift. Everything is always a gift. And in Deuteronomy chapter 8, this is where Moses was warning the Israelites that the time is going to come. They've been wandering in the desert for 40 years. They've been griping and they've been complaining. He even said at one point that I wish that we were back in slavery in Egypt. Moses tells the nation of Israel there's going to come a day that you're not going to want anymore. There's going to come a day that you're going to have everything that you need. There's going to come a day that you're going to have surplus. And the temptation is going to come that you're going to think that it was you who did something to acquire it. And what Moses reminds him is, don't you forget that it's God who's even given you the ability or the desire to want to do it and to acquire the wealth and the surplus. Don't forget. So wealth brings with it a temptation. Blessing brings with it a temptation to forget. Blessing brings with it the temptation to forget. May we tonight never forget how blessed we are. And while Brian comes up, the biblical picture of a blessing is simply this. God saying, I'm blessing you so that you in turn can give the blessing away. Put your hope in God who richly provides for our enjoyment. And blessing is meant to be enjoyed. Gifts are always meant to be enjoyed. I'm blessing you with a gift so you can enjoy it, so you can give that gift away so someone else can enjoy it. That's what the gospel does. That's what the gospel is. And so Brian's going to close us out. Tag you it, man, and pay attention because this is good.
Brother. Man, I love Freddie. I'm just going to keep moving, but I just want you to know that I love Freddie. He's been just a blessing to do life with together and to learn what it means to pass the blessing on. Just seeing his life model that tonight. So just what he's talking about, we're going to continue. Got to find the button that lowers this thing a bit taller than me, big dog. The blessing. Thinking about blessing, thinking about living in the blessing. What's the purpose of the blessing? When you are blessed, what is the goal? What's the purpose? And Freddie talked a little bit about enjoying the blessing. Like part of the blessings of life are just to be enjoyed, that God gives us blessings for our enjoyment. But with blessing comes responsibility, just as Freddie talked about. If we forget, when we've been blessed, if we forget what the goal of blessing is, then we become blinded. And when we become blinded to receiving the blessing and what we're supposed to do with blessings, what we end up doing is hoarding. What we end up doing is protecting. We protect. Right? Because blessing is about receiving, but then it's about giving, right? Receiving and about giving. But if we're not careful, if we forget, then we're blinded, then all we do is receive and we stop giving out. All we do is consume. All we do is take. And we stop passing on the blessing. We stop extending the blessing. But tonight, the challenge to us is to be extenders of the blessing, to be givers of the blessing. Jesus told a parable of the rich fool in Luke chapter 12. And he tells this parable about a guy who has a great crop. He has a ton of crop. It just expands. His fields are so full. He has so much food. He doesn't know what to do with it. And so he says to himself, this is what I'll do. I'll build bigger barns. I'm going to tear down the barns that I have. And I'm going to build bigger barns to store my crop. And then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear them down. I'll store up all my grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. When we forget that there's one element of blessing is just enjoying, the other element of blessing is extending it, is passing on the blessing to others. And when we forget that, and when we just become blind, and when we just protect our blessing, and we keep everybody else at elbow space, and all we're looking to is to increase our blessing, to build up our barns. When we do that,